The Forgotten Hero. Chapter 1. Wars eventually end. Death was all those of Alidor knew. For so long the humans' purge lasted, going on like a raging storm that cast woe over the lands, leaving few unaffected by the horrors that followed in the wake of warring armies battling for power. Peace, though, had finally returned. Sadly, the alliance of elves, dwarves and dragons that brought it about quickly crumpled away once no enemy remained to unite them. The seer's hold on power had been ensured, with the crown city cast to the sea and encaged. The humans' king Harold Hargo, along with his rebellion, had been vanquished. Only one hold of the banished king remained, and 9 years after the crown city's fall, still stood against the seers. A fortress the Affian was, one with many towers and great stone battlements scored with iron spikes. In the north it sits, deep within the seer's own land. A great number of miles lies between there and the seer's city of Denisa, although on a clear day, one with particularly keen eyes would be able to look out over the ocean and just about make out boats sailing to and from Denisa's harbour to the east. Knowing what force the seers had would now be marching for the fortress to lay siege, the commander, one Christian Barker, had hoarded enough food for the occupants to last as long as they'd need. For a number of years he and his small force had waited for their enemies to advance on the fortress, but little about the Affian was of interest to the seers within the Golden Tower. With wars raging in every direction, it was easily overlooked. Even after the crown city fell, so many other issues drew the seers' eyes. When they did finally see fit to raise a force and march on the fortress in the spring of the year 618, they were met by a constant stream of catapult and ballista fire. Prepared well, Commander Barker had, so after 6 months of laying siege and multiple failed attempts to storm the gates, Seer Elidom Godborn was compelled to pull the force that had been sent from Denisa back, forcing him to summon a pair of wood elf rangers who, along with their companions, had won their names during the humans' purge and in time would form a group that would become known as the Watchers.
"An impending fort it is," Banbury Bale said. A dwarf with a terrible stutter he was, and as he pulled himself up he brushed off the mustard yellow tunic and trousers he wore. "What are you doing? Get down! They'll see you!" Richard Balmouth ordered, pulling Banbury back down by the end of his long, dirty brown beard. The pair were lying on a bank, the night was heavy, and the only light came from the torches pacing up and down on the Affian's menacing battlements. "They can't see! Nothing!" Banbury stuttered. "We don't know that. Just stay down and keep quiet." Rolling over, Richard looked down to the bottom of the bank, to another wood elf who stood beside 2 pure white Satifah's horses, Caspian and Fiona. Richard had named these steeds. The wood elf wore the same Green Ranger's uniform and cape as he. Brothers the pair are, but the uniforms and the short swords on their belts are the only similarity they share. While Richard's brown hair was short and scruffy, with stubble over his chin, his brother Jonah's hung down to his shoulders and swayed like his hair had never known a nasty knot. "Still waiting on your thief, Jonah?" "He's not late yet," Jonah Balmouth snapped back to his brother. "There, look," Banbury said, tugging on Richard's cape. On top of the wall a different light now shone. All the others glowed orange, but this one was a bright white that quickly faded. "That's the signal. Let's move," Richard ordered, and the 3 of them left their steeds and hurried to the wall. Towards where the light had flickered they went, and as they approached the Affian, 2 ropes fell down from on top of the towering wall before them. Jonah quickly put the bow he carried over his shoulder and took hold of one. Instantly, his rope was pulled up the wall.
leaving the others to climb the one that remained.
Will the rotter pull us up also?
Banbury asked, securing his father's scythe in the holster he wore on his back. To most, Banbury's scythe appeared to just be a metal pole, which sits nicely within the harness he wore over his back. Flick the switch concealed on its side, however, and it doubles in length, springing out a razor-sharp blade as it extends.
I wouldn't count on it. Get going and don't slip. Last thing I need is your rear crushing me,
Richard replied. At the top of the battlements, the last member of this odd little band made himself known. A rough green hand greeted Jonah, helping him over the wall and onto a wooden walkway.
He said I was late, didn't he?
The owner of the hand remarked. He was a goblin, wearing a mucky old black tunic and baggy trousers beneath a hooded black cape, all of which helped conceal him in the dark and hide the many harnesses that covered his torso. His long, wart-covered nose twitched as he spoke, and the one protruding tooth that jetted up from the right of his lower jaw made him look rather sinister. Fear, however, was the last thing Jonah felt upon seeing him. "Don't fret about my brother, Waziz," he remarked as he squeezed his old friend's cheek. "Did you find the commander's room?"
"Sneaking into a young man's room, dear Jonah. What sort of thief do you take me for?"
Waziz blustered. "Don't joke. Where is he?" Jonah asked again as the others heaved themselves over the battlements.
"Took your time,"
Waziz said, with a bent grin as they did.
"Let's just finish clearing up this mess. Have you at least found him?"
Richard complained.
"Go with Bale and get the gates open for the others. Myself and Richard shall handle the Affian's master,"
Waziz said, and after learning the way to the gate, they split up.
"Is he well guarded?"
Richard asked.
"No, nothing we can't handle,"
Waziz replied.
"There's less fighters here than your seer's letter said, and not a wolf in sight. Might have been best to leave this one be while we still can. You don't have to go running every time the seers call, you know. You're fully aware why we can't. This war has to end, and the Lassours will never see it as over while Barker still rules here. Enough of your worrying. Let us hurry and end it before more have to die,"
Richard said, as they stepped over a pair of guards who Aziz had previously knocked unconscious.
"Let's just get our hands on him, and this war will finally be over and we can all go home."
To the gate, Jonah and Banbury went. The handle of Banbury's scythe caught the guard's chin before he could react, throwing him back and letting the pair pull on the winch to open the gate. Releasing the winch, Jonah took his bow and an arrow from the quiver on his back and fired it at a guard who was approaching on the wooden walkway above the pair. The arrow slipped past the floorboards and stabbed through the guard's boot, impaling itself in his foot. A yelp from the guard followed, and then a thud as he fell, knocking himself out as he went. With the guard unable to raise the alarm, Banbury soon had Affian's gates open, and beyond, hidden by the night and camouflaged in the tall grass by their green uniforms, the Balmoth's rangers waited. As the portcullis raised and the gates opened, they picked themselves up from the dirt and ran to the open gate. Bells rang out as they were seen, and soldiers grabbed their arms and ran from the Affian's barracks. The calm courtyard Jonah and Banbury stood in was quickly crowded, and the pair were surrounded by spears. The rangers' bows soon pointed at their enemies as they stormed through the gates, and silence once again returned as the two forces both waited for the other to make the first move. Before any blood was spilled, or even a harsh word uttered, A cry from Commander Barker's balcony drew them all. There he stood, grey was his hair, and untamed beard, for little of the young man who first took command of the Affian remained. His old wrinkled hand shook as he raised it and spoke.
"Lay down your arms. Lay them down, I say. Elf and wood folk, human and wolf, our war is done. The Affian is breached, and we cannot hold its keep any longer. The Balmoths have offered a truce, and I shall take it. Lay down your arms, and we will be left here under the Golden Tower's rule,"
Commander Barker declared, making his weary soldiers slowly drop their swords. None wanted to continue fighting, and few who could put up a fight remained. Most had grown old like their commander, forlorn men with grey beards his host were, while their young knew nothing of war. Bows and swords were dropped, breaking the silence in the courtyard, and but one human still held his spear.
"Put it down. Let this be done,"
Jonas said as he approached. Unlike his brother, whose face showed their many years of fighting, Jonas was unblemished, with rosy red cheeks and a smile so fair it would make most knees weak.
"Is it Woody, is it?" the man replied. "I am not as young as the others, I still remember. I will not be a slave for your seers again. I shall not kill for them, nor shall my sons or daughters," the man said as loud as he was able.
A fierce fighter rested within him, but his body had grown weak with age. As his strength failed him, his spear began to pull him down, but he was caught before he fell.
"It is done, I swear it," Jonas said. "Free men you and your kindred are. Let it end with us, for this war is over."
The morning came quickly, and the names of all the soldiers were taken, leading Richard to discover the fort contained few. Most there were former slaves, or their young. Few battle-hardened warriors of the Crown City remained.
"Why so many women and children?"
Richard asked the commander.
"Most fled here when the war began. Few men of fighting age are left, mostly widows and babes. The few soldiers we had have grown older than myself,"
Christian joked, then took a harsher tone.
"They will be treated fairly. I have your word. You shall see to it yourself." "I will. You have my word, and that of my rangers," Richard replied. "Good, for there are few things in this world to rely on. But a promise from a Balmoth, I'd say, is one,"
Christian said, taking Richard's hand and shaking it with what little strength he had.
"You know of me?"
Richard asked.
"Your name goes before you, Ranger, and that of your brother. If any other had snuck into my room, a very different ending we would have ourselves, but for the best this is. If the Crown City is truly gone, as the rumours say, a sad thing it is, but for the best, maybe. Let the blood spilling between us all end, and leave us mortals to live what lives we're left with,"
Christian said. With the siege of Affian over, the job Richard and his companions had been sent on was done. So finally, after months of weeding out militia, trapping spies, and ending blockades, they were all more than ready to return to their homes. For the Balmoth brothers' home was a farm that had been passed down to them when Richard's parents suddenly died. Although it had been many years since either had been able to return there, only children both were, when Richard's parents passed, and neither had the green thumb needed to run a farm. Thankfully, a kindly seer was to hand, one who took them under his wing, schooling and training the pair until they left him as rangers. Banbury Beale originally hailed from Cogginston, but after a rather unexpected event regarding a greedy earl, found himself married not to one, but 4 sisters. They had made him take out a hefty mortgage on a fairly impressive cottage that lay a few miles from the dwarven city of Orishon's gates.
"We'd be protected there in the shadow of the great gates, especially when you're off gallivanting," one said to convince him. "Good growing land also. You'd always have a fine roast waiting when you get home if we lived there."
Another would go on, until finally he gave in. Waziz, however, had no humble home to return to. Thieves such as he rarely do. He did, however, have a pair of apprentices, who, unlike he, had wisely invested the coin they'd procured into a run-down tavern on the outskirts of the sleepy little village of Chipton. Hardly a day and a half's ride from the Affion, this is where they all now rode to for one last drink together before parting ways. The Flipped Swan usually has a line of patrons waiting at the door to see what performance the owners would put on that night. The high ceiling allowed for incredible acrobatic displays that amazed diners, often causing astonished gasps as women fell from the chandeliers and were slowly unravelled by the yellow ribbons they were wrapped in, while some patrons waited to creep to the back rooms where a great deal of men and women would happily fritter away their earnings over a green cloth-clad table. Tonight, though, was not a normal night. No patrons waited at the door, and the few who dared draw close found themselves chased away by chattering bats. For tonight, the skies above the Flipped Swan were darker than usual. Upon the roof, bats scurried, while others swarmed around the chimneys and dangled from the tavern's gutters. Within, only one patron waited along with Waziz's apprentices for the Balmoth's party to return. A pale face she had, one that held no life, and as she waited the owners timidly tended to the bar.
"How much longer? She's making even my blood chill, and she hasn't ordered one drink," Ephraim Umbeter said. "Not too long, I hope,"
her partner Fandisco Carraguen replied. The sound of hooves and scattering bats then drew their eyes to the door opening, and both breathed a sigh of relief when Banbury stormed in past the flapping pests.
There's a real chill about here,"
he stuttered, and then saw the pale woman.
"Ah, that explains it."
"Master Beale, how did it all go?"
Fandisco asked, rushing to greet him.
As well as it could have, I suppose,"
Banbury replied, going to the fireplace to warm himself.
"Don't suppose you have a spot of rum and some pork chops for a weary fellow who's been pickety-peckies for 3 days now, do you?"
Pouring him a glass, Ephraim took it to him.
"Rum, yes, but food will take a while."
"Guess you have no need to heat the stove with only her here,"
Banbury stuttered.
"Fandisco, fetch my pipe,"
Waziz ordered, as he and the others entered.
"About time you got here,"
the pale woman said, speaking for the first time since she'd arrived at the tavern. Standing and marching before Richard, she took his arm.
"Are you really so eager to see me, my lady?"
Richard replied, as he was pulled by her to the staircase and up it. The sound of a door slamming closed followed, as Jonah and Waziz sat down.
"If the bloodsucker's here, there must be some trouble, right? You said you were done after all this. You promised you were, in fact. The both of you did,"
Fandisco said, handing Waziz his pipe.
"Shh,"
Waziz said, pulling him down and clipping him around the ear.
"She will hear you calling her that.
Let her have her way, and let's hope that's all she's here for."
As long as she's gone before the other rangers return, Jonah said.
Don't worry yourselves. It is your bellies we should fret for. A young lady such as you, Ephraim, should have at least a pot of stew ready for us chaps when we return.
Banbury laughed to himself. And it's thanks to that comment you'll be cooking your own dinner, Ephraim replied, pinching Waziz's pipe from his mouth and putting her feet up at their table.
Would you get your own?
Waziz complained, snatching it back. Go on then, Beale. Get the stove on. Takes a while to heat it up. Be waiting until morning for some food at this rate. Jonah chuckled. No point even putting it on for you, Woodies. I'll just get some bush leaves for you to graze on, the jolly dwarf said whilst marching into the kitchen. What happened then? Let's hear it. What adventure have the pair of you been on? Ephraim asked, and waited with Fandisco for Waziz to tell them tales from their journey. The young pair were both massive fans of Waziz and his stories. Are you two not tired of this fool's nonsense yet? He heavily embellishes most of our travels, you know, Jonah said. I'm afraid there's no exciting tale to tell anyhow. All went as we hoped it would, and we didn't even come across any decent loot, Waziz complained. Speaking of loot, Fandisco said, getting up and going to the bar. Reaching over, he grabbed an envelope from the shelf behind. This finally returned. About time as well, Waziz said, opening it to reveal it contained a small silver whistle. Is that a Satifah's whistle? Where did you find it? Only 12 were ever made, Jonah asked. A what? Ephraim wondered. You ask for tales, but don't bother to pay attention when I do tell you one. I've told you before of this whistle song, Waziz complained. The high elves and their steeds, the Satifahs, each wanted a way to find one another whenever they would need, no matter how far they were parted. So, a master silversmith created these. 12 he made, and gifted one to each of the 5 seers. 2 he gave to the royalty within the Evertree, and another 3 went to the first elfin lords, who returned to Denisa after the first's war ended. The final 2, they say, he kept for himself, one for him and another for his partner. But why do you have one? Jonah said, as the whistle was rolled over the table to him. As you say, I have no need, but I hoped you'd find a use for it, Waziz said, as Jonah picked it up to see Waziz had sent it away to have the words, Dear Jonah, engraved along the side. Oh, Waziz, Jonah said, smiling to him, as Fandisco went back to the bar, gesturing for Ephraim to follow as he went. Reluctantly she did, leaving the pair at the table grinning to each other, until Jonah said, You can't keep doing this, you know. Magic whistles, a bow from the finest craftsman in Messeler, not to mention all that trouble you caused when you stole that duke's saddle for Fiona. Didn't hear you complaining about the boots, Waziz chuckled, eyeing the heeled black leather boots Jonah wore. You can't keep stealing things for me, Jonah complained, once his blushing cheeks had faded. It's not like I go out of my way to. I find that when we were dealing with those ruffians who'd taken control of Lasur Castle in the last days of the war, Waziz said. You got it from the Lasurs? That's even worse. Seer Marlowe's is hardly the forgiving type, Jonah complained, while Waziz laughed off Jonah's worries. The door to the tavern flung open, and the rangers left at the Affian began piling in. At least wipe off your boots,
Fandisco yelled at them as his clean floors became covered in mud, and he did his best to contain the rowdy bunch that were filling the flipped Swan. The heavens had opened during their ride, and each ranger that entered was wetter than the last.
"You there, Malcolm? What has you back so soon?"
Jonah asked.
"Did you not hear, Captain? Those new fellas showed up to relieve us. They carried orders with the seer's mark,"
Malcolm said.
"Elites, that's what they call themselves,"
another ranger added.
"That's right, looked like right Burks they did. Norcia knows why the seers sent them. We'd already done their job."
Malcolm laughed with others, and none but Waziz noticed the look of horror that covered Jonah's face.
"Don't. It will be the seer's doing. Best not get involved further,"
Waziz said. Not hearing him, Jonah was soon on his feet and blowing the whistle as he went to the door.
"Jonah, wait! It can't be helped!"
Silent the Satifah's whistle was to all but Caspian and Fiona. Outside, rain poured down as Caspian came running, reaching Jonah with a roaring neigh.
"It's just a whistle. Is it really that loud?"
Jonah asked as he climbed up while Caspian continued to complain.
"Wait, Jonah!"
Waziz yelled, running after him. But Caspian was already turning to leave, forcing Waziz to leap onto the steed's back so he wasn't left behind. While his companions rowed away or fought with coals to heat the stove, Richard Balmoth lay on a warm bed with a cold body beside his.
"This is how it always starts,"
Richard said as Callaneer Pierce rose from the bed.
"What do you mean?"
she replied as her dark hair was brushed from her cold cheeks.
"A smile and a kiss. Then you tell me about something awful, after draining me of a pint of blood, that is. I'm right, am I not?"
Richard said. If the bats scuttling over the roof and Fandisco's reference to bloodsuckers hadn't already given it away, Callaneer was in fact one of the undead, a vampire, one of the Grey Count's own. The truce created by the pair had led them to skulk away for numerous secretive meetings over the years. Today, however, the Pale Lady would ask more of him and his small fellowship than she ever had before.
"He's found something. My father's generals are sure. It's what they need to create an eternal darkness," Callaneer said. "No offence, but even the Grey Count can't do such things, no matter how powerful you believe your father is,"
Richard said.
"I thought so too, but he has help now. A man not even I have seen. Someone's pulling his strings. Whoever he is, he's made my father a puppet. He has almost all of my father's generals under his control, and together they plot. If I had anyone else who I could go to, then I would. Failing turning myself into the seers to be turned to dust, you and your friends are all I have,"
Callaneer said. Sitting up, Richard asked,
"What exactly are you asking us to do?"
"We have waited as long as we can, and may have just delayed the inevitable with our alliance. You must remove him so I can take his place and stop whatever this man is doing before it's too late," Callaneer said.
"You're asking for more than we have ever done. It is no simple feat, even with the Count's own daughter aiding us,"
Richard said.
"I swear it, Richard. This is the only way. I don't want his power or his position, but it's the only way now. The Seers' war, with their former slaves, has weakened the elves. My father's generals see it, and will force him to act before you can rebuild. You know, as I do, your people can't stomach another war. When the clouds spread those of Messeler nor Dunisa, not Cogginston or
even the Balmoth's valiant rangers will have the strength to halt their advance.
But if we work together, if we go against him, before they have time to assemble the armies of the Vale, we could save both our people from this," Calanir said.
"We were lucky to survive the war, and now Amundin's dragons have broken their alliance with the Seers. We will have them to deal with before too long. I hate to say it, but you're right," Richard said, rubbing his forehead. "It will take time to prepare, and I feel we would need more hands than my small band has. I cannot ask my rangers to ride so far from their homes."
"I have a few loyal to me. If you can remove my father, we shall handle his generals. Then together we can finish this puppet master's games. Only you do I need, Richard," Calanir told him.
"What makes you so sure there's another? This could just be the Count's doing," Richard inquired.
"Because of the way he speaks. It doesn't sound like him anymore, hasn't for months. It's like another has taken his face and is just wearing him," Calanir whispered, as if the man she spoke of may have been listening.
"I shall speak with my brother. If he and the others are willing, we will help," Richard said.
Calanir fixed a final button on Richard's uniform to hide the wounds her fangs had left and told him, "I will return to Paratis and delay him however I can, while I can still move freely around the fortress. When you're ready, go to a town outside of the Vale called Virkun. Once there, find the stable master. He will be expecting you. We shall decide our next move when we are reunited," Calanir said.
"So be it. Be safe until then, my lady,"
Richard said, and with a smile to him, Calanir bit her finger, and as the deep red blood oozed out, she spoke words Richard didn't know, and a blood-red light filled the room. A second later, Richard heard the window open and the sound of a bat's wings fluttering away. Faster than any other horse were the Satifas, a fact Caspian proved. With haste, he returned Jonah and Waziz to the Aphian, and as they arrived previously, it was the dead of night when they approached. Dismounting, the pair sent Caspian away, while they entered the fort to find elves in golden armour marching about it, and tall fires burning all around. Elites these were, a new force created by Seer Marlos and Eloise Lasor to replace their former slaves. Going before the largest fire, Jonah smelt flesh burning, and then saw the bodies of the Aphian's people piled within. Past the flames, corpses burnt, leaving Jonah weeping before the fire when he saw the melting face of the old man he'd helped stay standing. "The bastards! Those sodding seers!" Jonah raged as the wind began to whiz about him. "Oi, Woody! Get away from there!" An unsavoury elite bellowed to him, but before he drew close to the grieving ranger, Waziz blocked his path. "Think who you speak to. For a captain of the Rangers is he." "No bloody Ranger should be here," the elite spat as he gripped Waziz and tossed him aside. What he didn't know, however, was that in fact Waziz was aiming to protect him. For as soon as he was thrown down, the winds that were whizzing about Jonah sung past Waziz to the elite. Such an incredible speed did the winds reach that they sliced through his armour, leaving deep gashes in his flesh and blood spurting from his many wounds. As his agony-filled cries rang out, more elites drew their swords and began rushing to the pair. Wielding his bow, Jonah fired arrows all around. Using the wind he controlled, he could manipulate them, so he didn't even have to aim. As soon as the arrows left the end of his bow, the element took control, guiding them to their targets.
Taking a dagger in each hand from the harness beneath his cape, Waziz ran to intercept a pair heading to Jonah's back. Tossing a dagger to the face of one, Waziz tripped the other as the elite's sword swung, letting him stab the elite in the back of the neck as he fell. While the fires continued to burn and the sun rose, the elites who had slain the people of Afian were felled. Blood covered the pair, and as the morning's light bathed them, Waziz took Jonah's hand and let the heartbroken ranger sob on his shoulder whilst the fires slowly faded.
"It was done. They were no threat to any. Eladam's won his war. Why would he?"
Jonah wept.
"Even Eladam's rage wouldn't lead him to this. It's as you say, he'd won his war. In another's hands, this evil lies,"
Waziz told him. The wind had still been singing about them until a shadow cast over the pair. On top of the Affian's wall, the master of the skies, the great griffin Charlemagne, had landed silently. He glared down to the pair as his wings folded over his back.
"How dare you interfere with the seer's order?"
Charlemagne bellowed down to them. Wiping his eyes, Jonah went before him as his sorrow left him, and he yelled,
"How dare we? You watch the skies and see us, but happily ignore their cruelty.
Send your seers. Tell them Jonah Balmoth waits for them, and we shall see which of those high cowards would dare face me." Jonah yelled up to the beast.
"They will not let this lie, son of steeds. The young in the golden tower don't see you as the old do. The days of seers draws to a close, and little sway will my master have over the ones who come next."
Charlemagne replied, "Let them see me however they wish," Jonah muttered, turning from the beast. With that, the great griffin's wings flapped and he was away to the sky. To the gate the pair went, and there they sat as Waziz puffed on his pipe. No seers did come, only their friends returned. Richard and Banbury had soon heard the same from Malcolm as the others, and with Fiona had hurried back to the Affian.
"I'm sorry, I just couldn't stop myself,"
Jonah said as Richard looked over the bloody courtyard.
"No more blood was meant to be spilled here," Richard said. "In our defence, the golden sword started it,"
Waziz added.
"The seers won't see it that way, and with what we now have to do, I was hoping to have their aid," Richard said. "Aid for what?" Waziz asked. "We must go to the Forgotten Vale," Richard announced. "Straight from your brother's mess to one made by your mistress," Banbury stated. "It's not like that. If what she's saying is true, we may have the chance to stop another war that will cover the lands before it starts," Richard said. "Going through the Vale is no easy feat, and getting into the Count's fortress will be another challenge altogether. The Paratus has never been breached. Even the dreaded Amundin stayed clear when he rained fire down on the Vale," Waziz said, rubbing his chin. "A task made considerably harder now. The seers ain't going to aid us," Banbury blustered, glaring at Jonah. "They wouldn't even help if we went to them. Neither Elidorm nor the Lasors care for the south. They will let it burn, as they always have before. They will sit in that accursed golden tower of theirs and do nothing once again. I'm not asking any here to join me, but if we had this chance years ago, the chance to stop the humans' purge before it began, would you say you wouldn't take it?" Richard said. "We'd be
dead after digging just 2 steps into the vale. Even worse, they could change us. There's no cure to their bite, you know. This could just be some elaborate trap for your pale lady to turn you, Banbury said. I doubt even she could stand him for an eternity, Jonah joked. I did hear a story a little while ago about 3 healers. Rumour is they can cure any ailment, fix broken bones, all with just their hands, some say. Nothing do these tales tell of the bloodsucker's curse, but I feel we will need some good healers if we are to take on this quest for your pale lady, Wazzy said. Stronger weapons we will need also. My scythe can cleave through a wolf, but silver will be required for this foe, Banbury told them. Quite, but silver is easily sourced. Healers, however, are not. Where are they, Wazzies? We shall try and get their aid, Richard said. Well, there lies the problem. They are being held in a cultian, Wazzies said. So, to embark on one perilous quest, we must go on another first. Bloomin' bloodsuckers! Now that god-awful countess, Banbury complained. I think I may be able to think up a worthy plan to free them, if they will help us, though. Well, we shall just have to leave that to Balmoth Charm.